attention is focused on an entire recount of valid votes cast on Saturday for the presidential election.
It is more than 6 hours since polling stations closed, but Singaporeans are no closer to finding out who will hold the highest office in the country.
Both Dr. Tony Tan and Dr. Tan Cheng Bock are now inside the elections department to witness the recount. Both men left their respective stadiums packed with supporters to come witness this for themselves.
Just as the field of 4 candidates was unprecedented, history is certainly in the making as we await these results.
Despite a challenge mounted by Dr. Tan Cheng Bock, there remains 3 contenders in the race for the presidency. Short of conceding defeat, Mr. Tan Ji Se says the short campaign period worked against him.
He could not correct the wrong perception that he was confrontational. Now, Mr. Tan Ji Se says a period of 3 months would have been better.
The only candidate to have conceded defeat so far says he and his family will rest tomorrow after the results are out, but not about to rest easy just yet. Mr. Tan Kin Lian intends to engage Singaporeans on issues that affect them the most,
such as housing and public transport. He has even promised to find ways to convey sentiments expressed there to the government.
Now, looking back on his campaign, Mr. Tan Kin Lian says he exceeded his initial budget of 50,000 Sing dollars for his presidential campaign by 10 to 20,000 Sing dollars. That means he spent about 60 to 70,000 dollars.
That's right. Now we've got Ottilie Edwards once more, who is going to look back at past presidential elections.
Mr. Wee Kim Wee was serving his second 4-year term as president when the Elected President law was passed. He assumed the role of elected president on 20th of November 1991. The first president elected by the citizens was Mr. Ong Teng Cheong, who became Singapore's 5th president on 1st of September 1993. That year, the Presidential Elections Committee received 5 applications for certificates of eligibility, but approved only 2. That of NTUC Chief Mr. Ong and retired civil servant turned banker Mr. Chua Kim Yao. Nominated MP Mr. Chia Shi Teck withdrew from the presidential race, while the applications from Mr. J.B. Jeyaretnam and Mr. Tan Soo Phoan, both from the Workers' Party, were not approved. In the second presidential election in 1999, 3 applications were received from Mr. S.R. Nathan, Mr. Wee Boon Yew and Mr. Tan Soo Phoan. Only Mr. Nathan was issued the certificate of eligibility, and the presidency was uncontested. In the third presidential election in 2005, there was again no contest, and President Nathan was re-elected on nomination day. Mr. Andrew Kwan, Mr. Ramachandran Govindasamy Naidu and Mr. Wee Boon Yew were not successful in applying for certificates of eligibility. President Nathan will not seek a 3rd term in office and will step down as president on 31st of August 2011.
And let's speak with our guest in studio, Dr. Gillian Koh from the Institute of Policy Studies. Dr. Koh, since we're talking about past and present presidents, what kind of legacy have the past and present presidents left that the next head of state would have to live up to?
Well, I think you just heard that President Wee Kim Wee was the one who was in the transition between the old system to the new system of elected presidency. So in the cases of the presidents before him, they were primarily ceremonial in terms of what they did. And of course, they would support some community projects. But Wee Kim Wee definitely put his heart and soul into community projects. Then you had the late President Ong Teng Cheong, who was very much devoted to raising the profile of the arts and culture sector. And I think many people will remember fondly of the President's Star concert, where he would bring together artists and get them to play or perform and raise funds that way. Next one is, of course, the current President S.R. Nathan, and he's actually put a lot of focus again on community causes. I think many of us will know of the President's Challenge, and I think that over the years they've raised about more than $100 million for good causes. But on top of that, I think President S.R. Nathan will be remembered very fondly for the focus he put on the caring professions. So he had awards to recognize social workers, certainly focus on teachers, and you read in today's sort of news media that some innovative teachers were recognized for what they do, and design as well. So it's an outstanding legacy in terms of these sort of ceremonial and community roles.
Now, with the recount going on now, it's almost certain that the next president will be either Dr. Tony Tan or Dr. Tan Cheng Bock. What do you see them embracing?
Well, I think towards the end of his campaign, Dr. Tony Tan was at pains to sort of say that his family is very committed to philanthropy, and I think that was a hint that he would not just look at the custodial role of how to oversee government's desire to spend reserves, especially if we're headed for an economic crisis, but also a lot of focus on social enterprise and philanthropy, and we can expect that he would be just as committed, I think, as President Nathan to social causes, really using the soft power of the office. That means that there is that sort of influence that he can give to the community to galvanize the community towards self-help and good causes. If Dr. Tan Cheng Bock is elected, I think from the word go, you know where his heart is. He would be devoted to that, and what he'd have to do is sort of add to that, he said, get more advice on the custodial roles with regard to reserves, and also on diplomacy. I think in his final broadcast message, he said that he was, not too far behind the best of breed. In this case, Dr. Tony Tan in those respects, but it certainly catch up. So I think there'll be no question whatsoever that either of these two candidates would really be good for the community role, just as much as President S.R. Nathan has been.
Now, we've heard it said before that the world is watching. In this instance, is the world watching? How important is the choice of president for Singapore?
Well, I think international media that's been writing about the elections has been saying that the elections is a referendum on the PAP. So I think that's only true insofar as if you've been listening to, say, a message like Mr. Tan Jee Sei's message or Mr. Tan Kin Lian's message, where they say that there's still a lot of hardship, maybe the government hasn't heard about the issues of cost of living and things like that. So I think they write it from that point of view. But there's also Singaporeans who might think that that's the preserve of the government duly elected in the May general elections, certainly the preserve of the elected opposition. And perhaps voters are looking for someone closer to what's been defined constitutionally as the role of the president. And therefore, I think with the two candidates that are now the front runners, I don't think that international press is going to be able to say, well, this has been a referendum. Maybe that's not what voters who have selected in the main Dr. Tony Tan or Tan Cheng Bock are really looking towards.